Hey guys, welcome back to Chapter 8. I am excited for this. God bless it. I've been waiting for this for a long time. Anyways, last time he finally got loose after like making Twilight's life a living hell pretty much. And now he's trying to make up for it, and the best way he can, to be honest, is just actually trying to talk to her with a letter. Because when us as the main character try to talk, we get pain and we stop talking. Now we're just a mute. Anyways, let's hop right into it. Chapter 8. We need to talk. Question and answers. Part 2. Twilight, we need to talk. I watched as Twilight mouthed the words as she read them, her eyes wide with shock. She read the message several more times before finally looking up at me. Her mouth opened and closed as she searched my face. Violet eyes met brown for the briefest of moments. Then she snorted and backed up a few feet. She chuckled nervously to herself as she looked around. Nice try, Rainbow Dash, but I'm not going to fall for it, she called as her eyes darted around, searching the dark corners of the room for the prismatic mirror. This is not Rainbow Dash's doing, Twilight. This isn't the reaction I was hoping for, but I wasn't going to give up now that I have started. Come on out, Rainbow, she continued, shifting her weight from her hoof to hoof. This isn't funny. Sighing, I leaned over and bobbed her lightly on the nose. She squealed loudly and backpedaled. One of her back hooves got snagged on the rug, causing her to flop down on her back, wings flapping against the ground and legs swinging wildly in the air. Does she think we're gonna hurt her? We're not gonna hurt her. Quickly and awkwardly getting back on her hooves, she spun to look at me. I simply tapped a finger on the paper and presented it to her. Twilight, we need to talk. Her eyes darted between the words and my face, her wings still spread wide. She rubbed her temples with her hooves and began to pace. This can't be happening, I heard her mutter to herself. This can't be happening. This is a dream. This can't be happening. I waved my hand to catch her attention. Shaking my head, I pointed out the words one more time. She stopped pacing and just stared at me. I could tell the gears in her head were turning and turning fast. I could almost smell the smoke. You're intelligent, you can understand me, she whispered, her voice trembling slightly. I nodded once again, never breaking eye contact with her. She swallowed loudly, wings rustling at her side, chewing on her lip. She studied me intensely again, trying to process what was going on. Finally she spoke again with just 2 words, prove it. Reaching down, I grasped a quill in my hand, dipping in the ink. I tapped the excess off, placing the tip on the parchment. I scratched out one word, how. She seemed taken aback by the word. I didn't think she expected that. She blinked owlishly at me. Who and what are you? She stammered, pointing the hoof at me, dipping the quill back in the ink. I comply. My name is Max, and I'm a human. As I finished writing, she grasped the parchment in her magic and floated it over to her. Reading what I had written, she snorted once again and flung the paper back at me. Horse apples, she growled, glaring at me. Humans aren't intelligent enough to understand ponies. Quickly picking up the paper, I dipped my quill in the ink for a 3rd time. And yet we are having this conversation, aren't we? Yes, but humans shouldn't. One of Twilight's eyes started twitching, and her right eye flapped wildly, running a hoof absent-mindedly through her mane. She took a couple of deep breaths to try and calm herself. Okay, she said. Okay, I need to pull this down a bit. Okay, she said, exhaling heavily. Okay, let's just calm down and think a second. We can figure this out. There has to be a logical explanation. Just think. As she muttered to herself, I wrote a quick message and passed it to her. Would you like a glass of water? That might help a little, actually. Twilight began before she snapped her mouth shut and her eyes widened. Stop that! She crumbled up the paper and shook it at me, ducking to avoid the projectile. I raised my hand in the air defensively and shrugged. Twilight groaned and placed her head in her hooves. Slipping quietly into the kitchen, I opened the cabinets and found a clean glass, filling it with some cold water from the kitchen sink. I quickly returned to the main room. Twilight still had her head in her hooves, muttering to herself, This isn't happening. This isn't happening. This isn't happening. Pushing her slowly off of the glass of water. Grasping it in her magic, she sighed and took a sip. Thank you, she said, turning towards me. I nodded and grinned at the mirror. Her eyes grew wide, and she sputtered, Stop that! I ducked as a full glass of water flew over my head and shattered against the far wall. Rolling my eyes across my arms and stared at her. This isn't working out as I imagined. Showing on the inside of my cheek, I walked over to the crumpled up piece of paper, bending down. I picked up and smoothed it out. I picked up the quill and scratched out another message before passing it back to Twilight. I'm trying to work with you here, but you aren't helping. I'm not helping, she shrieked indignantly. I'm not helping? You shouldn't even exist. There's no way that any human in Equestria should be doing what you're doing right now. My eyebrows shut up at this. Yeah. Equestria, is that the name of this place? Well, that doesn't really help me now. I froze as an idea entered my mind. It's crazy. No, it was stupid and crazy, but it just might work. Grabbing the quill, I quickly wrote out the sentence that might just turn this in my favor. Finishing the sentence, I turned and thrusted the paper into Twilight's face. She grasped it in her magic and reads what I had written. I'm not from Equestria. You could have heard a pin drop a half a mile away. Twilight's eyes grew bigger and bigger until I thought they were going to pop out of her head. Her magic failed and the paper fluttered to the ground. Her wings previously returned to her sides, slowly began to spread again. Her mouth opened wider and wider until it about touched the ground. The gears in her head ground to a stop. Her entire body was frozen. Then her brain restarted herself. Then her brain restarted itself, and she was able to speak again. And she did. What? Okay. Yeah, I'm not. I'm not from here. I'm from a different world. Best way to put it. If a month ago you would have told me all. Well, okay. If a month ago you would have told me all of what's going to happen to me, I would have called you crazy. But now there I sat, sipping a coffee with my owner as she came down from her self-induced panic attack. I sipped at the black liquid and shivered. I didn't much care for coffee back home, but the coffee here tasted a little better. It didn't mean I liked it any better, but it wasn't for me. The coffee was for Twilight. She seemed to calm down the minute she ingested the hot beverage. A couple of cups later, she was actually able to think straight and continue her previous conversation. So let me get this straight, she said, pouring herself another cup of coffee. It was currently 3 in the morning, and we were in the kitchen. Twilight was sitting across the table, eyeing me occasionally. I was just sitting there with a stack of papers, a quill, and an ink well in front of me, and a cup of crappy coffee in my hands. It had taken me a couple of tries to get the coffee maker working, but when I did the expression on Twilight's face was well worth the effort. I didn't think she could even fathom a human being able to work such an advanced machine. Well, advanced for their world, that is. You say that you aren't from Equestria, given her current state. I felt it best to keep answers short and precise. Yes. She glanced at my answer, then proceeded to drain her cup and fill it again. I sipped my drink as I waited for the next question. How? She finally asked, looking across the table at me. I had raised my eyebrow at that. Placing my mug on the table, I grabbed the quill, dipping it in the ink. I began writing out my tale. The only noise that filled the kitchen was the sound of a quill scratching on parchment. Twilight shifted uncomfortably in her seat as I continued to write. I didn't think she could get her head around everything that had happened in the past few hours. After several silence-filled minutes, I finished writing, slinging the paper over to Twilight. I picked up my mug once again and sipped it. Shakily, she picked it up under her hooves and began to read. I'm not entirely sure how I arrived here. One minute I was at my work, then the next thing I knew I'm smack dab in the middle of some goddamn desert. To make matters worse, I found that I was no longer able to talk. Twilight asked me why. I can't for the life of me tell you. Haha. After about a day of wandering in the desert, I lost consciousness due to lack of water. I was found by a group of ponies and placed in a cage. After about a day of wandering in the desert, I lost consciousness due to a lack of water. I was found by a group of ponies and placed in a cage aboard a train. After 2 weeks of riding in horrible conditions, I arrived in a large white city. It was there that I was found by Princess Celestia. She thought I would make a good gift for you, so she bought me and cleaned me up, shipped me off, and I arrived here. The rest of the story you already know. If you are intelligent and can understand us, why haven't you tried to communicate before now? Twilight asked, looking up from the paper, grabbing another sheet of paper. I once again dipped the quill in the ink. I could tell writing like this was going to get old fast. My own stupidity, plus I wasn't completely sure what would happen to me if I was able to convince someone that I was smarter than most humans. I didn't want to be dissected or anything like that. What would ever cause you to think that I would do that? oh, God damn it. What would ever cause you to think that we would do that? Twilight asked, scratching her face up in confusion. I blushed a little as I wrote my response. Mostly stories from my world. That's the only reason? Twilight looked over at me, cocking an eyebrow, shaking my head. I reached over to pluck the paper out of her hooves. A quick flash of quill over paper, and I slid it back to over her. There was also the fact of how I was treated during my 2-week train trip. At this, Twilight's head shot up, ears alert, as she looked at me. Does this have anything to do with Fluttershy saying you're malnourished? I nodded, frowning at the memory. An awkward silence filled the kitchen. Twilight fidgeted as she tried to think of something to say. I sat there, unable to talk. We were waiting for the next question. What made you change your mind? She finally asked, hanging my head. I read out the question. I read your letter that you were going to send to Princess Celestia. Okay, what? Okay, let me say those 2 parts. What made you change your mind? She finally asked, hanging my head. I wrote out the response. I read your letter that you were going to send to Princess Celestia. Reading this, Twilight looked up at me, eyes ablazed. Then why did you act like that all week if you were intelligent? The ferocity in her voice caused me to flinch, and I hung my head lower, regret clear on my face. Reasons. Explain. It wasn't a request, it was a demand. Running my hand through my hair, I picked up the quill. It wouldn't really matter. There'd just be excuses for how I treated you. Humor me, Twilight said icily. Her steely gaze locked on me, sighing. I placed a quill to parchment once again. I was frustrated. I went from being treated like an intelligent creature to being treated like nothing more than an animal. It was also something of a self-defense measure. If someone thinks you are stupid and intelligent, they'll tend to treat you like you're stupid and leave you alone. Be treated like an animal long enough, and you will become one. I got lost in the act, and for that I'm sorry. Twilight glanced back and forth from me and the paper for several seconds before putting the paper down. I guess I can understand, she said hesitantly. Sighing, she poured more coffee into her cup. If I ended up somewhere where ponies were treated like animals, I think I'd be frustrated and upset too. She looked up at me with a firm gaze. But that didn't give you the right to treat me like that. It was completely unacceptable. I slid a piece of paper over, cutting off her rant. Yeah, like, I would say that was annoying too. I know, and although it probably doesn't mean much, but I am sorry for that. I should never have done that, and nothing I'll say will ever make it right, but could you ever forgive me? Twilight stared at the piece of paper for a moment before looking up at me. I'm sitting here having a conversation with a human, she said, shaking her head, a small strained smile on her face. I think I can find it in myself to forgive you. Thanks. I paused, and I slid another note over to her. Does that mean you believe me as well? Twilight sighed heavily and laid her head on the table. Everything seems so unreal. I'm sitting here having a conversation with a creature from another world who happens to look just like one of the dumber creatures in Equestria. This shouldn't even be possible, yet here we are, she said, turning off with a shrug. For what it's worth, I believe that I am not... For what it's worth, I believe that I am the same as your world's humans, only smarter. Okay. Makes sense. Makes sense. So there is a universe out there with intelligent humans in it, Twilight said, mostly to herself, leaning back in her chair. She sipped her coffee and stared off into space. We sat there in silence for a long time, both of us content to simply sit there with our thoughts. This conversation didn't start like I had planned, but it had ended better than I thought. Twilight was taking it better than I thought she would, but there was still one question standing out in my mind, and I just had to know the answer. All I gotta say, Max, Twilight is like one of the most understandable ponies out there. Just saying. She is one of those ponies that just literally would understand any situation if you just presented yourself to it. So, it's good. Okay, so what happens now? What do you mean? Twilight asked, tilting her head to the side. Are you going to tell anyone about me, or what? Twilight turned her gaze to the window, staring out at the stars as she chewed on her bottom lip, thinking. Finally, she shook her head. No, I'm not going to tell anyone else about this just yet, she said, turning back to me. Why? Well, while it's true that you wouldn't get dissected, there are still silent... Okay. Well, while it's true that you wouldn't get dissected, there are still some scientists up in Canterlot who would have a heyday with you, and I don't think you want that. That seemed reasonable to me, but that still didn't answer my intended question. So what do we do now? Twilight stared at the paper for several seconds, running a hoof through her mane. It needed a good brushing, but I didn't think she noticed or cared. At the moment, she continued to stare at the words, her silence starting to make me nervous. Finally, she looked up at me and gave me a small but genuine smile. How about we start from scratch? She picked up the letter she had originally intended on sending to Celestia. With a quick flash of magic, the paper was torn in two as the two halves fluttered onto the kitchen floor. Twilight held her hoof out across the table. Her eyes met mine, brown gaze into violet. Hello, my name is Twilight Sparkle. Would you like to be my human as well as my friend? Smiling, I reached out and grasped her hoof, shaking it up and down. I nodded. Releasing her hoof, I grabbed my quill. Hello, Twilight. My name is Max, and I will be happy to be your human and friend. This is great. That's the end. Oh, God, man, I love this. This is great. I'm loving this story so much. Alright, so we communicated with our owner, which is good. And she knows that we are intelligent as can be. Well, not as can be, but at least average. Anyways, guys, thank you all guys for listening and doing what the heck you guys do. And I'll see you guys in the next one. Goodbye.
100,000 stories have filled my head.